Warning, the podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast, The Murder of Megan Liebengood, Part 2 of 4.
So after we determine what the cause of death was in her injuries, what we do is continue through the trash. Now, I'm going to put a little shout out to Detective San Antonio. He actually got into the trash with us, but we discovered something very, very nice. We discovered car keys. Now, I can't say that they're hers, right? So you have to weigh. You find a set of car keys. How are we going to connect to see if they're hers? Do we take the chance, even though we're wearing rubber gloves, do we take the chance on let's not lose the DNA, take them back, book them in as evidence, and later on see if they belong to her car? Or do we take that chance, keep the rubber gloves on, drive them over, see if they belong to her car? We weigh the losses, and Rob and I talked. We said, drive over.
Yeah, I believe I even checked with the lab at that point. You had Marcy Adkins on a couple of shows ago and talk to her about, hey, as the scientist, that you're the one that would be examining this item for us. What would you recommend? She's like, with it being in the trash, I would believe any and all DNA would be contaminated to the point where we wouldn't be able to obtain DNA. So she recommended that, yeah, if these are your two options, I would recommend going ahead and testing out the car keys on the vehicle.
You know, speaking of that, her and Laura Sudkamp, people need to go back and listen to that. It's Forensics with Laura Sudkamp and Marcy Adkins. It speaks exactly to what they talked about, the importance of the collaboration between everybody and having those conversations. How could you do this without that?
They've been wonderful throughout our entire career at the lab. We've always leaned on them. And on serious cases, you know, we've asked for favors, and sure, we've had to buy some lunches. But no, we really developed a good relationship with almost everybody up at that lab. They're fantastic people and are so willing to help out.
Well, and also, I guess, had you all maybe asked the husband, does she have a particular keychain, that you can recognize the keys with? Are we looking for like a little teddy bear or a Gold's Gym little swipe tag?
I'm going to be very honest with you, like we always try to be. No, that young man, you're 18 years old. You're usually looking forward to going to your prom with who you think is the love of your life. Imagine you're 18 and the night before your wife gets shot. We're trying to give that family a little space. So we're trying to do these things on our own without bothering him.
And it wouldn't matter regardless. If we found any set of keys in that dump truck, they were going to get tested on the car. So if he recognized them or not, it really wouldn't have mattered. We were going to do our due diligence and test out the keys.
So you locate these keys and someone was going to run them by and check. And I'm guessing you and Rob at this point are still sifting through tissues.
Right. Yeah. Funny, the northern guy with a bad accent volunteers to take the keys over to check to see if they work in Megan Liebengood's car.
Such a team player.
He really was, yeah.
I think he just didn't want to keep smelling the smells in September.
Pretty much.
Well, while he's taking the keys over, Rob and I and probably 5 others. Oh, we had 2 other recruits that we volunteered to go with us into this trash pile. And believe it or not, when you're going through trash, there still has to be a system because later on you're going to have to testify. How do you know what you went through and what you didn't go through? Because where did you find the keys? Did you find a pile that was just dumped there before you dumped the trash truck, right? So we had to separate the pile that we've completely gone through pretty far away from the pile that we've gone through, so we can testify to that. And we have 2 recruits going through with the rest, 4 of us, 6 of us total. And lo and behold, we find a purse.
Oh, my.
Now, did you have a description on her missing purse?
No, we didn't. But we're still going to collect it. And then later on, after her funeral, we'll get with the family. And that was the exact plan Rob and I had. We'll get with the family and see if they can identify this purse.
So you're hoping that maybe this is hers. So you gather it. And I guess keep looking for more things that could potentially have come out of this car.
We have to keep looking for any ID, any credit card, anything like that to connect her purse, this scene, with the dumpster.
Well, and I think what would be tough is you're looking, and yeah, you can look for credit cards, this type thing, but you're looking and you really don't even know what you're looking for. Just that needle in a haystack.
Yeah, exactly. It's more labor intensive at this point, this investigation, than it is using your brain and forethought of coming up with suspects.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, we were continuing the search, but in the back of my mind, I'm just like, San Antonio's been gone 20 minutes. We should be getting a call. You know, my concern's like, because that's it. If we get those keys that match up to her vehicle, then Chris's individual that helped him out, her information is accurate, and then we're going to have a suspect to go after. So that is huge, and we're doing our job, but we're really hanging our hat on those keys.
So have you heard back from him? It's been 20 minutes. Have you heard back from him telling you that the keys did or did not work?
Yeah, I forget who he called that received the call from San Antonio. But yeah, it was a positive match to the key. So we were all really excited at that point. We felt confident that we knew which avenue that we needed to go down to try to solve this case. So it would have been tough if those keys hadn't matched. Like Chris said, we found the purse and whatnot, but we didn't know that at that time. It was those keys that indicated that the information we got from Chris's subject was valuable, and we may have a name of a suspect.
So were those the keys to that car when he went to test those? Did you all have that car in evidence, or was it still in the parking lot where she lived?
We had the car towed to an impound lot that the police station or the police department owns. And yeah, he started the car. You have to put it in ignition and start. We want a total confirmation. That's what he did.
Let me ask real quick if you can just sum it up. From the time of the call to the time the keys were found, how many hours do you think we're at? Because I know we went through that phase where you didn't have much to do and you went back for the next day.
Probably 10:30 we get called out. Chris gets the information probably 8 a.m. We stop the truck, get the truck pulled over. I'd say right around lunchtime is when we find the key. So we're looking at really just 12, 14 hours.
Gotcha. I like to keep that chronology out there so we get a good pace on this.
And it was really exciting because, like we said, we went home after a couple hours because we really had no leads. And then that next morning, Chris gets that info and boom, we're taking off.
Good feeling. Because, that disappointment, that's like a guilt thing when you were talking about that before.
It really is, because you're doing it for several reasons. And any detective that doesn't say this is probably a liar. You're doing it for pride because you think you're a good detective, one. Moreover, you're doing it for the victim. And I know that's so cliche, but you become connected. When you see a young 18-year-old girl laying in the parking lot and after talking to her family and friends, she's done nothing wrong. She didn't put herself in that situation. You kind of want to do whatever you can to solve this case. And then third is the family, right? They're putting all their hopes in the detectives and doing the job right, because later on, they don't want an acquittal in that trial room either.
Yeah, it's true victims. They're scary to deal with because there is that burden of responsibility as the primary. I recognize Megan Liebengood's murder was a horrific crime, and I wanted it solved, but Chris was the primary on that. The primary carries so much more weight. It's his name on the case file. I'm going to do whatever I can to help him, but he knows it's his responsibility, and those true victims really get to you. There was a case from 2017, a little 11-year-old girl was asleep in her home having a birthday party with her friends. Somebody comes by and puts 38 bullets into the house, and no bullets hit anything, but one hit her spine and was paralyzed for life. And I remember going to the scene, interviewing some people, and there just wasn't much going on with that case. And it was probably 5 a.m., too close to work to go back and get some sleep. So I went to Waffle House and had a cup of coffee and was just sitting there. Just realizing if I didn't solve that case, that one was going to haunt me for the rest of my life. So I'm sure Megan Liebengood was the same for Chris. It just, as the lead, you take on this huge responsibility because so many people are wanting justice for that loved one.
And it's interesting because, we take the victims as we find them. We know that. But just recently, me and Wendy had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Greg Davis, a medical examiner. And I think everybody in this room has worked with Dr. Davis before. And we asked him the same question in an interview about what really gets you. And he said it was the same distinction, the people that can't defend themselves. And again, that's not saying that one victim is better than the other or more preferred than the other. But for him, it was the people that they had no defense mechanism or ability to at least fight back. And he put that in the zone of kids and elderly and elder abuse and whatnot, or in this case, just an 18-year-old woman that's getting groceries out of the car. It would strike me the same way.
Well, and I can imagine also for the husband, he is probably feeling, number one, he doesn't want to walk in that parking lot for just the sheer memory of what he had seen the night before, but also the safety of him staying there. Are they going to come back for him? Did they see him walk out and approach and make that 911 call? So I feel like for him, he probably was in quite a panic, not for just losing his wife, but for his safety as well at that point.
Oh, that's correct. He trusted where they lived, right? He and his wife picked that apartment complex and thought that neighborhood was safe. So I'm sure he's questioning himself now. And is he going to go back and stay in that apartment, or is he going to find somewhere else because he doesn't feel safe? He doesn't know if they targeted his wife for a different reason, or it was just a happenstance that they came upon her.
So we try the car keys, they work, you find the purse. And what do you do at that point? Do you keep sifting until you find what may be more evidence, or do you just, how do you know when to stop sifting through the trash?
It's an easy answer to your question, until it's all gone through. That's an unfortunate thing for all the detectives, until it's all gone through.
So you went through every bit of it.
Every diaper, every little pizza box, everything.
So when you get through there and the car keys worked, what do you do? Is the day over? Do you go home?
No. It's late afternoon when we get through the trash. So now I have to remember the mother I met that morning. Now I have to meet her and her daughter at a specific location and get all the information that she knows. So I do that on my own, and Rob starts to go, and he knows I trust him wholeheartedly because he's done it well. So he goes back to the police headquarters and starts running any kind of dispatch calls into that area, any past robberies in that area for a certain period of time. So while he's doing that, I'm interviewing this person. Now, remember, my promise to her is I will try to keep her daughter and her quiet so no one knows who they are as much as I can. I can't promise wholeheartedly, and I tell everybody that she won't have to testify, but I will do my best not to. So you're used to this, David. And Rob's done it before, so we put our heads together, Rob and I do, and we've come across some reports that there were some robberies on Codell Street by two young male blacks. Who robs a post? I've never heard, and even the housing projects, no one robs a delivery mail person, right?
What are you going to get?
Well, they bring the checks.
Right. There's checks.
Yeah.
They carry all the welfare checks, all the Medicare, everything.
Yeah, but not endorsed to you.
Well,
right?
You're thinking logically.
There we go. Yeah, you're starting to put a brain cell where it doesn't
There's a
exist.
protected class, certain people. And liquor store owners, not so safe, but postal workers, they're gonna make sure they're in the neighborhood fine.
Yeah, that's the only robbery of a mailman in my 23-year career that I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Oh, I would have never suspected that a male person, male, female, whomever, would be a victim of robbery. You just think letters and rubber bands.
Well, that's what stood out to Rob and I, right? So it's got to be some young person that doesn't have respect for who delivers the mail, who makes sure grandma gets her check, Social Security checks, whoever, right? So it's somebody that doesn't care. So now you have two things. You have a person that shot our victim in the head 3 times, and you have a person that's robbing the mailman who delivers good news to everybody, right? Rain, shine, or snow. So we look at who the suspects are, and absolutely the names match from the robbery suspects to one of our homicide suspects.
So the people were caught who robbed the mailman.
They were not caught. This case was an open case.
So they were suspected. So you had that name.
So now that's an out for Rob and I, that we don't have to use my woman.
There we go.
We're going to bring 2 people that were involved in the robbery of a mailman. And it's kind of a chess game. It's fun. Rob and I talk about it. So the one name that was involved on the robbery robbery report is not even involved in the homicide. So common sense tells a detective, you probably want to interview him first and see what he knows about your suspect. And if he's heard your suspect, because they're going to run together, right? So that's what we did. We went and collected one of our suspects and the other person that was suspected of robbery. And we brought them down to headquarters that evening.
Well, with this robbery of the mailman, were they just still being questioned, but there wasn't enough evidence to arrest them, and that's why they were not arrested at that point?
That's a great question. So in robbery homicide in Lexington, the cases that the robbery homicide unit investigate are missing persons, assaults. So that's assault first, which is a shooting, down to assault fourth, which is a bar fight. You have murders, robberies, kidnappings,
terroristic threatening, harassments,
all of those. So you're talking each detective in my time was getting 40 to 45 cases per month to investigate.
Right.
So a detective may have not, this report wasn't that old. It was probably 2 weeks old to a week old. So the detective probably even hadn't got a chance to even contact the male person that was a victim yet, because he's still calling people from the other cases he has.
Well, how did you know the name of these two people to link them with your murder? How did their names surface?
Witnesses on the report.
For the mailman. Okay.
Well, let's go back and touch base so people are clear. You were able to protect their anonymity, because what we have to keep in mind, and hopefully this makes sense to a lot of people, is we fortunately live in a country that when you're accused of a crime, you have the right to cross-examine the person that's accused you, which actually includes witnesses. But what you're talking about, what we have the availability to do, is that if we get tip information is loose. There's not a lot of guarding to it. But if we independently corroborate that tip, like you all did, to such a strengthful piece, is the tip really is insignificant anymore. It just remains a tip. It's a lead.
It's a lead.
It's a lead. And what that's the craft that you have to have in this, and it doesn't always work. You know, there's times you have to have candid conversations with people and say, you know, I'd really like to not do this, but we're at a juncture, and it means a lot. So that's a hard place to be. But I don't want people thinking that that's shafty or anything like that. But what it is you just independent, corroborate it, make it strong in and of itself, and then the lead stays the lead. And that's a good thing to do when we can do it.
So you go get person A, who you know is not involved in the murder, but potentially in the mailman. So what happens?
We actually get person A and the suspect at the same time, because we want to psychologically wear them down. So we want to make sure they see each other. And they don't know what they're in there for, right? They don't know why the police department's bringing them. They know they've done something bad, but suspect doesn't know which one he's in there for.
Yes. He don't know what you know.
Right.
And you're trying to create some distrust between the two as fast as possible, correct?
Exactly.
That's it. Purposely walking one of them in front of the other into another room, so we can say later on, it's like, my partner's been in there for about 30 minutes with your buddy. You really think he's going to protect you? You know, these are games that we play that, you know, that I wish we could ask people questions and they'd give us truthful answers, but that's rarely the case in a homicide investigation. So there is some sportsmanship in going into it and using your experience and dealing with people and using people against each other. It's a craft that you have to get good at if you're going to be effective.
It's funny because I just got a message from another podcaster that does true crime not too long ago, and they asked, would it be appropriate for the police to show a suspect another suspect's statement, or is that a conflict of interest? And I knew where they were going with it, and I messaged back and I said, but I'm not even looking at what you're talking about, but they're trying to wedge between these two people. Now, a witness statement, that'd be really stupid. You know, it would be contaminating that your reputation would suffer. But I did make it clear to them that without reading what they're looking at, I said, what they're doing is wedging those people by taking the words, and we've all done that before. So.
Well, it's funny, in this case, we actually did it. This was the first case, and I've been there upstairs in Homicide for several years. And this is Rob and I and the lieutenant talked about, what do we have to gain? What do we have to lose? And what will it cost us in trial? Mm-hmm. So we recorded the conversations, and without giving anything up, but when I talk about each interview, I'll explain what we did.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. And again, you made a good point, because we really want to take people into this game. You talked about consequences at trial. There's a lot of things that in investigations the police actually have the ability to do, and this will shake some people, but you can lie to people. But you make a good point. You have to find the sweet spot and I was myself, I tried to be careful because when I'm in trial, I know what some of how that could resonate in that jury. And that's where you've got to be careful, is that while you have some latitude with it, is if you hit the accelerator and you go to a jury trial, you could look really shifty. So I just want to make sure people understood that we have that latitude, but most of us are careful.
Yeah, and it is. It's one case is not worth your career reputation.
Amen.
And, it's a small enough community. We only have 6 circuit court judges that we, have murder cases in front of. And they talk at lunch, so you play above board. No case is worth your reputation. So I'm with you. I use those games, but I played on the safe side. I didn't even want to get close to true gray area, because then you're getting into suppression hearings and such. And it's easy to lose a good reputation in this game.
Yeah. And something that you could explain to the jury.
Absolutely.
If you got hit with it, could I rationalize it and bring them with me on that? And again, demonstrate that I still had character.
And I think I'm going to put Rob on a pedestal. I hate listening to podcasts and hear each other pat each other on the back, but it's actually documented in court. He testifies very well. Rob does. And I remember him in one trial, the defense attorney always says, so you lied to they always take that approach, right? You lied to my client when you were telling him these things in the interview, correct? And Rob responded quite well, I think. And I'm sure you don't have a copyright on this, so you'd recommend everybody to use it if the time arises. He responded by saying, well, if everybody in this community was 100% honest when the police talked to them, we wouldn't be allowed to lie. Everybody would be truthful. That means I would have to be truthful. But unfortunately, your client lied, so I had to.
Yeah, and that's why. And actually, if you look at the court cases without citing them, that's exactly where they go to. The courts have accepted a long time ago that we're in a cesspool of dishonesty.
Yeah. We are allowed to use deception to a certain degree, because if we weren't given that latitude, an interview would simply be, Mr. Thomas, did you kill Mr. Jones? No, I didn't. Thank you very much for your time.
That'd be it.
That would be it.
Yeah.
So thankfully, the court does give us some latitude because they do recognize this is a difficult situation that law enforcement is put in. But for listeners out there, we can say it's like, well, we've processed the scene, and typically, the killer leaves some DNA. So you need to be very aware of that. Where we can't do is produce a document showing that we collected DNA when there wasn't. So again, there's the fine line that you can and cannot cross. And if you're going to be an investigator, especially in a serious unit like Homicide, you better learn where that line is.
Yeah. For me, a lot of it was props, that things that weren't direct, like you take in large file folders that have nothing to do with what your case is, because you've got 6 pages at 24 hours in.
Right.
But you bring in these huge binders and you have them under your arm and you're almost falling over. I remember it wasn't a murder, but on another kind of case one time, as I took this is back old times, right? This is VHS. I stopped at a convenience store and got a cheap VHS tape and wrapped evidence tape around it and took that to the interviews. And I swear every one of them, somebody would look over and say, I'm not on that video. And it was like, I never said I had a video of you. Right. That was a blank tape. So those are the kind of things I liked using too. But they're all good. But again, the last note on that too is you've got to find the sweet spot on that and maintain your character. Because I have seen cases, not in RPD, but in other places. I'm watching, like when Wendy watches all 4 episodes of Forensic Files, because we know that's how many exist.
They have a Forensic Files Part 2 now. Thank you.
Okay, there's 5.
There he goes.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? You see cases on some of these documentaries, and you're like, oof, and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, that's going to get kicked out at a suppression hearing.
Oh God, yeah, and it's crummy. But anyway, we've hit that lick pretty hard. We'll go on.
So let me explain something that I forgot to tell your listening audience. Is the suspect that we were provided, his address where detectives picked him up was a mile away from the shooting. Same neighborhood, just a mile away.
This was the suspect and not member A that had involvement with
That's
the
correct.
postmaster.
That's correct.
So you have the first guy, and now you've got second guy who's a suspect. Do you all bring them in at the same time, as in they both know that you have them, or was it until, Rob, you said you walked one in front of the other? Did they both know they were going there at the same time?
Not until that moment. We picked them up at 2 different locations simultaneously.
I have to ask, what was the look on the one guy's face when he sees his friend walk by?
there was silence, right? There was silence between the two of them as well. And they just looked at each other, didn't even give a head nod. And so we walked them directly into the holding area upstairs at the detective bureau. And when I say the holding area, it's like a prison cell door with a key lock, and it's 10 by 10 room with a wooden seat, hard tile floor, and cement walls with a camera in it so we can watch yourself for your safety.
So are they in there together or are they in separate
No,
rooms?
you separate them and you make sure there's a room in between them so they can't talk or whisper to each other through the wall.
So you leave them there for a little bit, and do you all take off together to interview them individually, or do you all split off and interview them both at the same time, but separately?
We interview them separately together, Rob and I together. And we had to have a strategy. So we left them in the room by themselves for a little bit. I'm not talking like 4 hours.
Yeah, 20 minutes or something.
We get them
like
a
that.
drink of water or soda, whatever they want. We ask them ahead of time. And we're letting them, serves two purposes, because we get to visually see who we're going to talk to now. And when you get to go pick them up, you already see what their house, what their home life is. Are their parents there? Because we're talking juveniles, right? Juveniles have special laws that we have to go by. If a parent is not present when we pick them up, we have to contact a parent. We have a certain amount of time where we have to contact that parent or guardian.
So person A and person B both were juveniles. Okay.
Yes.
So you leave them there, and I guess when you pick them up, I'm going to backtrack a little. When you went and picked them up, did they ask, why are you picking me up? I mean, I'm sure they just didn't hop in the car. Did the moms ask? Did they ask?
There's a strategy behind that as well. When you pick a person up that you suspect of a crime, you should send 2 people per person, and that's not involved in the case. So when that person asks, hey, why are we here? They can honestly say, I don't know. There's a couple detectives down at headquarters that would like to talk to you. So that's what we did.
So they have no idea, and the parent didn't refuse the child going with you.
No, we made contact. The parents weren't home, but we made telephone contact. And they said, yeah, go ahead and talk to them. We'll be there when we can get there.
Now, you have to get that permission. Is that correct, or you do not?
We always take the parents' consideration into effect because, like we were talking about earlier with character, if they said, no, don't talk to my son until I get there, and we went ahead and interviewed a juvenile, it really doesn't look well on the department. So we would never do that. And a lot of times, depending on the parent, you want that parent in the interview room because they've done their best to raise a good child, but are kind of aware that they've kind of gotten off track a little bit. And those moms and grandmothers, sometimes they are the best asset in an interview. They will be like, you better shut your mouth right now unless you're going to tell them the truth. You and I both know what happened that night. You're not going to lie to these people. We've had several cases where moms and grandmothers helped us get admissions and confessions simply because they're good people.
Right. So was that the case in this, or did parents/guardians not attend the interview?
They didn't attend, but they were good people. They showed up afterwards. Absolutely, they were good people.
So the 2 people are transported down separately, and you kind of let them sit for a little bit with their drinks, refreshments, what have you. And then you pick one to go and talk to, right?
Right. That's what we were doing while we were letting them sit in the room. Which one, you're watching them on a monitor, right? Which one's more fidgety? Which one's kind of rubbing their hands? Which one's worried and can't sit still? Some you'll find real calm. They'll sit there, they'll lay on that bench, fall asleep. A lot of people try to read that as, oh, they're guilty because they're sleeping. That is a sign of stress by all means. They're tired. They're tired of having to worry about this. But in this case, I think it was more of they're younger. They don't know really what their body's going to, when they're in trouble, what their body's going to do. So Rob and I watched for a few minutes and decided probably the least culpable of anybody is who we're going to talk to first. And secondly, we didn't know if guy A, not the suspect, was really involved in this. We had a feeling he wasn't, but we didn't know for sure. So we thought, by watching his hands rub, couldn't sit down, we're going to talk to him first.
So you go to guy A, who supposedly was a suspect with the postmaster.
Yes.
And you both enter the room, and what happens when you enter? Hey, you know there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, which is our website, and it has show notes for imagery and audio and video files related to the cases you're going to hear. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and YouTube, which has closed caption available for those that are hearing impaired. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you download your podcast from. Subscribe to the Murder Police Podcast and set your play to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.